Mobile, Alabama, a 300-plus-year-old city that's located in almost the direct center of the nation's Gulf Coast. It's known for sweltering hot summers, breathtaking visual charm, and for being the actual birthplace of Mardi Gras. But many don't realize it's also known for something else. Its rich and deep baseball tradition.
Well, you know, when you think about, you say, well, you get your all-star team out, you go to New York, they had pretty good all-star. Then you could, well, look what we got in Mobile. Half of them didn't know we had these guys from Satchel Paige was from Mobile. My God, I didn't know that. Hank Aaron's from Mobile, didn't know that. Billy Williams, Willie McCovey, Amos Otis, Ozzie Smith, and Milton Frank Bowling. You know. Right, absolutely. No, but I mean, all of a sudden people say, wow, where did they come from?
Mobile baseball, as I see it, has been a well-kept secret. And Mobile can put the best team in America on the field if you go by city, by city, by city.
When you look at the Hall of Famers we put out, it in my opinion, it goes right back to Satchel Paige. It goes back to Ted Double Duty Ratcliffe and his brother Alec, and several more, and which were Negro League players, you know, and the ones that followed them, our Hall of Famers, are just part of the tradition.
Baseball runs through Mobile's DNA, and it's produced dozens of big names, 5 of whom have achieved baseball immortality by being enshrined into the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. Satchel Paige, Hank Aaron, Willie McCovey, Billy Williams, and Ozzie Smith, who left Mobile at age 6 but still proudly proclaims it his home, are enshrined for eternity. And they're at the tip of a very talent-rich iceberg. In fact, at production of this documentary, only New York City and Los Angeles have more Hall of Famers represented than little old Mobile. That begs the first question: why and how did so much talent come from here?
There wasn't many things that you could do, you know, as a black kid growing up. You know, you either had to play baseball or teach school. There wasn't many things that you could do. And eventually, I guess, by me going around playing baseball and doing some of the things I had to do, then along came Willie McCovey and some of the other boys came along, and they started doing other things.
See, we've always had baseball on Saturdays and Sundays. That was our neighborhood outlet. The local team played a team from Mississippi, Florida, or even another team from Mobile. It was everybody in the neighborhood that showed up at that ballpark that particular Sunday or that Saturday, because that was their outlet. Wasn't no TVs,
right.
All right? Very few movies you could go to. So baseball was the entertainment for our neighborhood.
Growing up in Mobile, there was a lot of people who devoted a lot of time to the game of baseball. And of course, we're talking about Satchel Paige, Double Duty Ratcliffe, a lot of individuals who played baseball before I did. And everywhere you go in Mobile, like on a Saturday and Sunday, you would see baseball games, practice sometimes a doubleheader.
You know, it's a good question, because Dizzy Dean used to ask us that when we had the game of the week, back in those days. And he said, what do y'all do in Mobile? Is it the water or whatever it is? I couldn't tell you.
According to local historians, baseball or some form of the game may have been played in Mobile all the way back in the 18th century. But in the 1860s, baseball's influence stretched from here all the way to Cuba.
Well, the thing about baseball in Mobile, it's a port city, and that, that's one reason baseball came to Mobile. It was played in all different forms, stick ball, round ball, all different names. And in the mid-1860s, Civil War time, Spring Hill had their own regular baseball team, the Badgers. And a fellow by the name of Nemesio Gillo from Cuba was a student at Spring Hill. And once he graduated Spring Hill, he left and went back to Cuba. And with him, he brought the first baseball, bat, and gloves, and started the first team in Cuba. And he's credited with bringing the game to the island. He actually went on to form the first teams and the first league in there as well.
In addition, Spring Hill's Stan Galley Stadium is the oldest continuous use baseball facility in the country, dating back to 1889. In fact, in the first half of the 20th century, industrial leagues were formed, with many using play there as a stepping stone to the majors. You can't talk baseball tradition in Mobile without talking about Hartwell Field. Now it's pretty much an open field after it was destroyed totally by a hurricane back in 1992. But when it opened back in 1927, it was one of baseball's grand venues of the time. In all, Mobile area fans were able to witness 32 professional teams that called that space home at some point or another between 1927 and when the field finally went dark to professional baseball in 1970. Some of the names they saw were 11 future All-Stars, names like Don Zimmer and Dutch Leonard, names from the Mobile A's like Sal Bando, Blue Moon Odom, and Rick Monday. And yep, there was even one Hall of Famer, a young man at the time by the name of Tony La Russa. So you see, anybody who was anybody in the game of baseball likely played here in Mobile at some point or another. Even though the charm, politics of the day, and perhaps even the location of Mobile allowed it to escape the ravages of Civil War and 100 years later, the unrest of the Civil Rights Movement, it was still part of the Jim Crow South. Blacks had to sit in the segregated section of Hartwell Field, as this blueprint shows, but the social order of the time didn't deter their love for the game.
We had a guy who was a manager. We called him Fats. He supplied all of the equipment. We would go down to the Mobile Bears, and all the bats that were broken, a splinter, we put it back together, put nails in them and tape them, and we would use them for our Sunday games. We also used their uniform. We were called the Plateau Black Bears. We had the Mobile Bears. At that time, they had Shotgun Schuber and Chuck Connors and people like that, who were the Dodgers farm team. And we walked from Plateau to Hartwell Field just to see baseball in a segregated park.
When I was a kid coming up, Hartwell Field had the Mobile Shippers. The Mobile Shippers. That was the local Mobile team. I don't know. It's one of the I think it was the Dodger farm team or something like that. And we used to go to the games. We had our section because of segregation. We saw a knothole game. That was a little card we had to have, and we could go in free, only for teenagers, and small kids, which were black. So put us in a little section down the right field line as far as away from the home plate. Well, we were there and enjoyed it,
Yet the Hall of Famers, all African American, all born between 1900 and 1955 in the midst of Jim Crow, somehow found a way to make their indelible marks on the game they loved. Economic times were hard, but there was always time to fuel the passion for baseball. The first guiding light was Leroy Satchel Paige, the seventh of John and Lula Page's 11 children, born in 1906. Much legend surrounds his life and his bravado, which his performance often backed up. His uncanny pitching talent reportedly began with him aiming at and hitting birds in flight, and the legend only grew.
So probably the first great scout from the city of Mobile was a man named Alex Herman. Alex Herman was many things to the city of Mobile. He was also the first king of Mardi Gras for the MAMGA organization, which was the Colored Carnival Association at the time. But Alex Herman saw a young man, about 14 years of age, taking oyster shells and throwing them at a telephone pole. And he was hitting that pole dead center with every throw. And if you've ever thrown an oyster shell, you know that they're cylindrical, but they're thin. And so they slide up and down. If you throw it up and down, it'll slide back and forth. But this young man, he was nailing this telephone pole with every throw of the oyster shell. The rest of the story, obviously, is that that young man was none other than Leroy Satchel Paige.
I don't know, somehow you may have seen the movie about Satchel Paige, where he told everybody to sit down, that he's going to strike out everybody. And that happened right here in Mobile.
Wow.
Against this guy named Ralph Donahue, that they pitched. It was called the Plateau Ballpark. And each guy told his fielders, defensive player, to sit down. They proceeded to strike out everybody. They pitched to dark, and the game was called because of darkness. And I saw that in the movie. I said, hell, that happened right here.
And I became real close to his sister, Palestine Caldwell, and used to go visit her and porch sit with her and ask her questions about her brother. And she has since passed on, but she would tell, and I will tell you the story she told me, and I would put it in a scope of, he was the Michael Jordan of his time, right? Mm-hmm. He was the barnstorming guy that didn't just pitch, he made money. He was mm-hmm. looking to make money. And so I tell you, like, just think about Michael Jordan in the 40s or 50s and the things that he had because of who he was. Right. And she would tell me that he would come to Mobile and he would be in his Cadillac and it would be a convertible and he would have rings on his fingers and nice watches and everything. And almost every time that he gave to Mobile, I don't know if it's true, she said he would get pulled over by the police. And they want to know, son, where'd you get that car? And then he'd say, well, this is my car. And he'd pull out his license and, oh, Satchel Paige. And said, oh, where are you going? We'll give you a police escort. Take that one step further. I was interviewing Hank Aaron a couple of years ago, and he said, Randy, did you know that Satchel Paige once owned his own airplane? That's how he got around the nation in his barnstorming. And I said, no way. And he said, do you know how big that was for a black person back in the day to own their own private plane and how much we looked up to that?
Former Major Leaguer Bernie Carbo, who now calls Mobile home, owns and runs a baseball training facility. As an 18-year-old rookie, Carbo actually played with Paige when he was in the Reds organization. The lanky right-hander had worked 3 scoreless innings in his last Major League appearance at age 59, and he was still at it with the Reds' Peninsula minor league team the very next year.
And in 1966, I was sitting in the clubhouse all by myself. I got to the ballpark. I was a little depressed. I wasn't hitting very well. And this man come in with a sharp suit on, beautiful shoes, and a nice hat. I never seen anyone dressed so fine in my life. He looked so good. And he came in and he sat down next to me and he said, my name is Satchel Paige. He was 60 years old. And he said, I come here to pitch today. He said, why don't you come down to the bullpen with me? So as I went down to the bullpen, I was sitting there watching him warm up, and he told the catcher, put the glove here, put the glove there, put the glove there, put the glove. He says, see that, Bernie? I can hit all those spots, Bernie. He said, I tell you what, I could have pitched in the big leagues. I should have pitched, but they knew I'd get everybody out, and they wouldn't hit me. And before I'd go through the whole lineup, I'd tell them I'd strike everybody out before they could hit a ball. And he said, you know, when a man gets on first base, he said, I just look at them and step back, and they get back to first. I'm not going to waste my arm trying to get them back. And he pitched about 5 innings, gave up a couple runs.
Satchel Paige, ever the barnstorming, self-promoting, arm for hire, paved the way for so many others who would follow. And you can bet Paige knew exactly who he was and what he represented. And because of his showmanship, excellence, and longevity, just about everybody has a Satchel Paige story.
I hadn't ever seen Satchel before, you know, for close and personal. And this guy was walking down the street. And he had on a coat, kind of plaid, like dog slacks, kind of bald-headed. And I had never seen him before in the neighborhood, you know. And somebody said, that's Satchel Paige. I said, that's Satchel Paige? He said, yeah. I said, well, my mama knows his sister. I said, I got to go holler at him. Mm-hmm. So I walked up to him and I said, Mr. Paige? I said, my name is Clausel, and I really am pleased to meet you. And he looked at me and he said, everybody is.
But one thing that comes to mind is when Willie Mays was coming up. Willie was like 17 years old, and he ripped a double off of Satchel in his first at bat. I think he hit it almost out of the park. And Satchel went over to him after Willie was getting up, brushing himself off, and he looked at him and he says, that's it. And Willie Mays just kind of looked at him, according to the stories I've heard, and his next 3 at-bats, it was what, in Willie's quote, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh.
Of course, many of Page's peers never got the chance to show their skills on the MLB stage, but Mobilians like Ted Double Duty Radcliffe, who was both a solid pitcher and catcher, was easily one of the best who ever graced the Negro Leagues. His brother Alex was touted as an outstanding infielder as well. There was Bobby Robinson, the human vacuum cleaner, considered at the time perhaps the best defensive third baseman anywhere. You've already heard about Page's legendary pickup game matchups against fellow Negro leaguer Ralph Donahue. The games were often scoreless and lasted all day, according to legend. Page also headlined barnstorming teams, which packed even Major League Baseball stadiums around the country, playing against white major leaguers, often headlined by Hall of Famer Bob Feller. Maybe this quote best describes the greatest pitcher in Negro League history when he once said, quote, "Ain't no man can avoid being born average, but there ain't no man gotta be common," end quote. Satchel Paige could pitch with anyone, and his legend began by throwing stones and seashells. But Mobile was also known for producing some of the most fundamentally sound hitters the game has ever seen. The story of their development is legendary and 100% true. During the times of segregation, racism, and forced oppression, African Americans often had to make do with the materials that were available to them. Now, of course, blacks love to play the game of baseball just as much as anyone else, but in the Mobile area and many other areas in America, the affordability scale for equipment like baseballs, bats, and gloves was a little bit out of reach. Never fear here in Mobile. Bottle tops and broom handles did just fine. The game, played on a smaller scale, was called top ball, and it may have played a key role in developing some key skills needed for aspiring young ball players. A game played with items that most people discarded, tops was a big part of one's hitting development, especially if you were poor in Mobile. And plenty of Mobile's best absolutely swear by it.
Well, the top ball, as you call it, the top ball, it's a soda ball, soda top is what you saying.
Right.
And what they did, we would take all the soda tops off of bottles, 7-Ups, Coca-Colas, whatever, and save them. And then we would save them, and then we would use them as baseballs. And we would mark in the dirt, home plate, third base, second base, and etc., you know. And each time you hit it, if you hit past second base, you get a double. That was my game, was soda pops.
But we used to play tops all day, and we could make that top go this way, that way, down, up, and, you know, change-ups. You know, you could throw the thing and it just floats up there. Wow. But it's like throwing a wiffle ball. And I really think, because I did a commercial here, the guys were, well, why are you such a good hitter? I said, hand-eye coordination. And of course, I played a lot of tops. They didn't know what that was.
There was a lady that owned a neighborhood store. We call her Miss Savannah. And she was kind of mean.
Okay.
But she would make us work in the store, and we had like a tablet, and whatever you ate, it was deducted from your pay. So we said, well, okay then, since we ain't gonna make no money, let's get these tops. All those tops that she had, they had a machine that all the tops fell down in the machine when you open it up.
Right.
So we'd go and collect buckets of tops, you know, and we'd get out in front of her store, and we'll start playing probably around 4 o'clock. It'd be still daylight then. And we had a guy that was twirl the tops in at you spin them, you know. And it started getting darker. This guy's still out there spinning them tops.
So what tops actually did, got you to concentrate on the release of the top and have the ability to hit it. So if you didn't watch the release point, then you could never pick it up, so you could never be successful in hitting the top. That's probably one thing that helped Hank and Billy and all the other guys, because they were focused on release point.
It's my belief, I think, that there's some type of wrist strength that comes with that game that enabled Hank Aaron, Billy Williams, and Willie McCovey to get some type of extra oomph on the swing that enabled them to hit 1,702 home runs combined, which, by the way, was the year Mobile was founded in 1702.
Though segregation prevented former All-Stars Frank and his late brother Milt Bowling from even meeting their African-American counterparts until they reached the big leagues, the Bowlings also honed their skills with these crude tools.
It was a hand and eye coordination. And you know what, I've gone around after I retired, I talked to Little League coaches, high school coaches and all, and I told them, I said, go get me a broomstick and get me those things, and we start doing this. And the kids would, my yard out here, I still got things all over my yard where the kids would come out and play because it was fun. And it was just, I didn't know how good it was, but we played it all the time, so it had to be great what it did for us. You know?
You got to have an eye. You had a broomstick. And of course, they would have singles, doubles, home runs. And of course, the guys, just like Hank would always say too, you got to have a good eye for that stick. You didn't have a bat, and some of them could take that top, a soda top, and make it curve, straight. They did wonders with it, and you got to be able to hit it.
And hit they did, though few would ever have predicted it at the time. Henry Louis Hank Aaron would turn his prowess into arguably the greatest baseball career ever.
I guess it's all started when I left home from Mobile with one pair of pants, one pair of shoes, and that was it.
Wow.
And $2. Oh, I'm sorry, I had $2 in my pocket.
$2.
Yeah, $2 in my pocket.
Even back then, that wasn't a whole lot of money.
It was not a whole lot of money, but I found a way that I could stretch it from here to there.
And Hank used to play ball for a guy here in Mobile by the name of Ed Tucker. And Hank's team would always win. And Hank used to always tell me that after the game was over with, he would go by Ed Tucker's house and Ed would throw him a little bit more cash for hitting so many home runs.
This was after Aaron was seen by scout Ed Scott playing in a fast-pitch softball game. And yes, he batted cross-handed, but it didn't hinder his hitting. Aaron, you see, was a natural.
Okay. I did so. In fact, we were talking about that. At Cooperstown. Billy and all of us was sitting around reminiscing, and he was saying that, and I told him I hit cross-handed. In fact, I even hit left-handed,
Wow.
and did pretty well.
Wow.
I did very well, very well.
But you didn't bring that up to the bigs, which you
didn't bring it to the big leagues because I was doing too well on the right side.
You did pretty well from the right side. Even as his illustrious career was ending, Aaron made an impression, especially on Bernie Carbo, who has the unique perspective of having played with both Mobilians, Aaron and Satchel Paige, as their careers were coming to a close.
So, I'm sitting next to Hank Aaron, and I noticed he has a different grip, and I says, Hammer, I says, what's this grip? He says, well, you use this grip, the ball's going to come off the bat stronger. So it's the big knuckles, and you come in here, and this is what they're doing today. But it hurt me so bad, so I ended up putting my little knuckles on my big knuckles and hitting the ball this way. And then I watched him hit, and I saw him on inside pitches. Instead of stepping this way or opening up, he would have his batting this way, and he'd step this way, he'd step back. So what he was doing was, instead of stepping this way, he would step back and hit the ball this way. And I said, I never seen anybody do that before, Hammer.
Right.
I said, why do you do that? He said, well, the easiest home run, the shortest part of the ballpark is down the line. I've never seen anyone do that today, yesterday, or ever before, other than watching Hammer do that.
I just had a serious way of hitting, But I held it. I always held one knuckle would always line up with
Right.
a pair of knuckles.
Wow.
You know, I felt good with the way I made myself look at the way I swung a baseball bat and looked at the way I knew that I had to approach the game.
In the beginning, what Aaron did bring to every league he played in was grace and unorthodox consistency that no one dared try to change because of the results it produced. After some tense negotiations with his mother, Aaron left home to play with the Negro League Indianapolis Clowns for $200 a month. His contract was later sold to the Boston Braves, who bested by $50 a month the offer of the New York Giants, who'd already signed a young star named Willie Mays. Ever humble, soft-spoken, and perhaps even shy, few seem to recognize Aaron's remarkable consistency in the big leagues. He averaged 33 homers for 19 straight seasons, with little fanfare, especially in his hometown.
Then I was back here in Mobile, and I was really, like I said, I was involved in public relations and the community and the Chamber of Commerce, and I was really on a committee that was hopefully was going to really flash Hank all over the world. You know, here a guy's getting ready to beat Babe Ruth's record, and you live in Mobile, and nobody there, sports people knew a little bit about it, but why didn't we put up a big billboard on the interstate? You know, every day changed. I even mentioned all this to these guys, and these guys, you know, just he'll do it.
Different. You think it would have been different if Hank were white?
Yeah, I think so. God, it's got to be. Yeah, it's got to be. I don't know why. It's just the fact that nobody even thought about wanting to do something.
Aaron's production eventually commanded national attention, and he got more than he bargained for, moving ever closer to baseball's hallowed home run mark of Babe Ruth, a chase which produced a lot of fan support, but almost as much hate mail and death threats from those who didn't want a black man to replace a white icon.
Hank and I talked a great deal about is that when he was breaking Babe Ruth record, it wasn't fun to come to the park anymore because he was getting all those threats. No way I could feel what he was feeling, even though I got hate mail too, but not to the magnitude that he was getting. Right. But it's not time to quit. It's time to push forward, and that was my conversation with him. You got a chance to do what no other player has done. So it's not time to quit. It's time to put your nose to the grindstone and go ahead on and break those records, and all of that will stop.
Lifetime friend Thomas Withers witnessed the intense pressure on Aaron from close by.
But I know during the time that he was trying to break Babe Ruth's record, he went through a whole lot. He was sheltered some. He had a very good friend of his, was on the police department up in Atlanta. And he would be with Hank, I believe, 24 hours. And that's when all the pressure was on him. I guess you saw it in the newspapers and so forth and so on. So my wife said, well, go up there with him, ask your buddy, go up there with him. So I called him and I said, I'm gonna relieve you, the detective, and let him go home with his family or something. So I stayed up there 7 or 8 days, and I stayed with Hank.
Because of the death threats, many held their breaths in fear as Aaron rounded the bases after topping baseball's all-time home run mark on April 8, 1974, especially when two young white men joined him rounding the bases. Thank goodness they were just excited fans.
I don't know whether anybody noticed this or not, but one of them had a binocular case around his neck. And inside the binocular case was a gun.
Okay.
And he told me, he said, I didn't know whether I should shoot him or what. I said, I'm glad you didn't.
Oh, man, that would have been awful.
That would have been awful.
Aaron went from humble beginnings in Mobile to having countless awards, parks, streets, structures, and stadiums named in his honor. His humility in no way means he lacked belief in himself and his ability to follow his baseball dream.
Stan Williams, it was 3 balls and no strikes, and he hit me in the head with, and this was before they had the inserts in there.
Right. So.
And he knocked me to my knees.
Wow.
And when I got up, I didn't get up. I stayed down, and Fred Haney came and gave me some smelling salts.
Yeah.
And so I said, I better stay in this game, because if I get out of this game, if they get around and they, oh, he's nothing but just a little chest cat. Yes,
yeah.
so take advantage of him. I never knew that I had a pipeline to the big leagues. Never knew that. But I did know that after watching some of the other players play, looking at them play, watching them play, I felt like if they could play this game, then I could play it, you know. There was absolutely no way that any of them could outdo me on the baseball field.
Willie McCovey was the 7th of 11 children born to Frank and Esther McCovey. His youngest brother, Clausel, remembers the early playing days of his big brother.
A lot of my brothers wanted to be boxers, you know, until they got their head bashed a few times, and then that killed that. But Willie stuck with baseball. That's what he did. He stuck right there with it. And the school right down the street, W.H. Council School, everybody played ball there. It was a lot bigger than, I mean, not land-wide, it was a lot bigger. Everybody played ball there that lived in the neighborhood. And they'd get Willie to play. And Willie hit the ball and knock out a few window panes in the school up there. Everybody leave him, he went where they were going. They say, Willie Mack knocked out another window pane.
Eventually, the raw McCovey caught the eye of playground director Jesse Thomas, who referred him to the Giants organization. But the head of the McCovey household wanted his son to have no parts of professional baseball, which he likened to gambling.
When they came to get Willie, Jesse Thomas, that was the guy here that sent most of the guys up, JT. They came to the house, and Willie hadn't said anything to anybody. He knew they was coming because JT had told him, but he didn't say nothing because my father real religious. My father equated everything with sports, with gambling. He said, I don't want my son to play baseball. I don't want him to do that. But my mama, that's a good deal, you know. I looked at Willie, and Willie was kind of disappointed because these guys looked like they was getting ready to leave because Daddy had said, I don't want nothing to do with it. So I took it upon myself to go in there and talk to my father. And I said, Daddy, I said, he really want to do this, you know. I said, that's all he ever talk about. And my father said, after we talked for a few minutes, he said, well, I'm not going to ever hear or see him play. And he didn't. But he let him go.
McCovey, who had hitting struggles early, settled into a 22-year career in the majors, all as a first baseman. He affectionately took on the nicknames of Stretch and Big Mac and became an iconic figure in the San Francisco Bay Area, amassing 521 career homers, 18 of them grand slams, and 1,555 RBIs. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1986 and passed away in October of 2018. A hero out west, his hometown barely seemed to notice, and the sting of the oft-bitter memory of the Jim Crow South kept him away.
Willie eventually ended up leaving Mobile, and the only 2 times he came back was for my father's funeral and my mother's funeral. They wanted him, matter of fact, I got some pictures over there that they had when they had his day here. And they wanted him to come for that. But he was so uptight with the way it was, you know. He said, I'm not coming. My mother ended up going out there to accept his awards.
One thing during those times, when white ball players go and they play ball, they come home, the dealerships here in Mobile, they would let the guys come out and they give them a brand new car to drive I'm so and so and so. Let them work at the dealer, sign autographs, and they were paid. One thing, they didn't do that for Mac. And a lot of people wondered through the years why Mac never would come back home. And of course, Willie McCovey was a fine guy, but that was on his mind. And he went out to California and people just loved him. They gave him a job there at a dealership. They let him sell cars, come in when he wanted, sign autographs, and they just loved him. But they wouldn't do that for him here.
Another talented fellow came along around the same time as Aaron and McCovey. In 1938, Billy Williams was born in Whistler, just north of downtown Mobile. He was an all-around athlete from a family of athletes who played baseball with or against the other eventual Hall of Famers. Many know of Williams's illustrious Major League Baseball career, but he might not have even been the best player in his own family.
My older brother was a pitcher. I had one brother play in the outfield, and my other brother, Franklin, who was in the Pirates organization, he played up until AAA. Because when I made the Major League, I came to the big league in 1959, and my father, you know, people were saying that one of those William boys made it to the Major League, and everybody thought it was Franklin, see, because he was such a good player. I just got chosen by the right baseball team. They needed players, and over there he had Clemente and, you know, a lot of players over there, but he did get to AAA.
Billy's love for the game came from watching his older brother Franklin play with so much homegrown talent that a future all-time great was barely even noticed.
My brother was playing the Mobile Black Bears. He was on that ball club, and I went down to watch him play. And Aaron was playing second base on the same team. So, you know, to watch those guys play, and it was the guys that, you know, if you look at the players that played at that particular time, Aaron, you know, didn't stand out among the other guys because there was so many good players. They played the game and they enjoyed the game.
Inspiration can only go so far when constantly reminded of second-class citizen status, as Williams was after he signed a contract with the Cubs organization back in 1956. By the time he was with Class D San Antonio in 1958, the stress and frustration almost forced this future Hall of Fame talent to leave the game he loved.
We had to stay in the black hotel. When we went on the road, we couldn't stay at the white hotel. And of course, we're going up and down the freeways of Texas, going to the different cities to play the game of baseball. And as we drive up to a restaurant, the white boys go in, and they go in and sit down and have a nice meal. And we had to wait on the bus till somebody think about, hey, we got Billy and J.C. Hartman on the bus, we got to take them some food. So this was a problem for me. And as I was coming back home, and I'm getting fed up with this stuff anyway, you know. So I'm coming back home, and all of a sudden I get a call from a brother. We talk and stuff. And he said, we're having a good time down here. The fish are biting, and it's just great, you know. And I got back to the hotel. We were staying at the old Manhattan Hotel in San Antonio. And that night we got in, and I didn't unpack my bag. I said, JC, take me to the train station. And JC said, where you going? I said, I'm going home. I don't want to play this game no more.
Negro League icon and Hall of Famer Buck O'Neil, then a Cub Scout, intervened.
John Holland, who was the general manager here in Chicago, he called Buck O'Neil and said, Buck, we got a kid that went home. Hey, go down there and see what's wrong with him, because we think, you know, eventually he gonna be playing over here with Ernie. And go down there and see what's happening. So I don't want to go back and play ball. My father was saying, why don't you go back, Billy? You know, you're doing pretty good. So I see the Fury coming up in the yard, and all of a sudden, I said, that's Buck O'Neil. Oh, I'm in trouble now. He made great progress in talking to me to go back. Is when he taken me down. He said, where you play ball at when you was here? I said, down at Pritchard Park. And he said, come on, go with me. Go down there and play. So we walked in the park, and guys I had gone to school with, you know, they came up and said, Billy, we hadn't seen you in a while. Where you been? And He said, well, I've been off playing baseball, man, playing professional baseball. And they started talking, and the guy said, oh man, I bet that's great. I bet that's great, man, playing professional baseball. I bet that's something you always wanted to do. Old Buck O'Neill sitting back like that. He knew it was getting to me. And a couple of days after that, I was ready to go back.
Williams proceeded to grace Major League Baseball for 18 years, amassing a .290 career batting average with 426 homers and 1,475 RBIs. He also delivered 2,711 hits and played in a one-time National League record 1,117 consecutive games. Williams became a Hall of Famer in 1987. The man known for his sweet swing saw his number 26 retired by the Cubs and his statue erected outside of Wrigley Field. While the legends of the Hall of Famers were being built, plenty of others were waiting in the wings for their chance on the big stage. The New York Mets' young outfield trio of Tommy Agee, Amos Otis, and Cleon Jones all had solid major league careers and helped the team win the 1969 World Series, beating out Billy Williams' Cubs for the division title. All were from similar baseball beginnings in Mobile, which included love for the game and their home, in spite of the hardships that came with black life in the Deep South.
I was never affected in a manner in which it would deter me not to realize where I came from, to share in how I've been raised. I was never taught by my grandmother or my great-grandmother about hate. We in the South kind of accepted who we were and what we could do. We fought in our own way to make a difference.
I just felt like that, you know, I was given a lot of my dues, I guess, because I was from Mobile and all, but I always felt like those guys never really got the respect in Mobile that they would get in another town. So like I told you one time, I was talking to the Chamber of Commerce in Mobile about having Mobile represented in the Rose Bowl parade. They needed somebody on the float from Mobile who was famous. You know? And I mentioned Billy Williams to them, and they said, who's Billy Williams? You know, and it made me feel, yeah, that's sad, you know. I called Billy, and he was so, elated that Mobile wanted to do something for him. Golly, you know, wonderful. Wow. But we've come a long way. Yes. Come a long way.
Though talented pros were coming out of Mobile in droves, many of its youngsters would fall short of a Major League Baseball career. However, community support was necessary to keep baseball alive and give economically disadvantaged youngsters options. Local semi-pro teams like the Pritchard Mohawks, backed by community volunteers and businessmen, were organized. The Mohawks were the dream and effort of businessman Jesse Norwood Sr.
One of the reasons for that was we had no parks. There were parks, but they weren't for us.
Right.
And so my dad saw him trying to play baseball in the streets, and he said, do you guys want to get organized and really play baseball? Because this broom handle and soda caps ain't going to do it. Right? What they wound up creating was a semblance of a major league club, because they imitated that by starting their own farm club. And they took the younger kids and created a team called the Apaches.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the Apaches were middle school kids who were waiting to come up to become Mohawks. The biggest story out of all of this is not my father and what he did, but the guys who participated, because we profile a lot of them in terms of what they went on to become. Teachers, ministers, successful supervisors. You know, they went on to a very productive life. A lot of them went on to college, which was unheard of, off of baseball scholarships, believe it or not.
Baseball and softball leagues were formed and financed by a number of local black business owners, none more prominent than druggists John and James Findley, who put together some of the finest teams you could find anywhere along the entire Gulf Coast. Yes, baseball was still thriving for African Americans in Mobile, even though most would never make it to the big show.
Business owners recognize that we've got to find something to occupy the time of our children in a positive manner, or they'll get into negativity. So business owners like my father and my uncle, who owned drugstores, Finley's Pharmacies, Finley's Drugstores here in the city of Mobile, as well as my grandfather, who was Dr. James Alexander Franklin, who was one of the first African-American doctors here in the city of Mobile. They would sponsor sports teams. And as a child, I can remember all of the trophies that would be on display in my uncle's store as well as to my father's store and my grandfather's office from the teams that they sponsored that played baseball. Just like today, our children need us as adults who are business owners, who have the means to provide these types of opportunities to them. Because, you know, sports doesn't just teach sports. When you start talking about teamwork and you start talking about character and how you play the game, those things directly correlate to the business world.
Guys like Hank, he played against us on this Phillies team, okay? He was our opponent. He played with Brookersfield. They sponsored a softball team within that particular league. Willie McCovey. He also played against us at Harmon Recreation Center. Yeah. And we had batting averages and everything, you know what I mean? So during that time, yeah. But it was exciting.
The teams had to go out and find sponsors, and sponsors took care of the hats, and you bought your own glove and a jersey,
and
the bats and the ball. And I don't guess it was too expensive, but I guess in relative terms, I don't know what, but Daddy enjoyed it. Daddy enjoyed being the owner, sponsor, you know, and it was his team.
The backdrop is perseverance and what the sport taught these guys as discipline, how it shaped and molded them, and how the game was more than strikes, base running, and whatever. Gave these folks character, gave them a career. Not necessarily in the game, but it got them outfitted for what today would be a formal college education.
While plenty of solid players who've made a mark on Major League Baseball proudly call Mobile home, there will likely never again be a confluence of circumstances that produce such a cauldron of talent, especially for African Americans, whose participation in baseball is on a steady decline.
My brother scouted for the Red Sox for 30 years. He came up in a time when the black athletes were really good. They were out there playing, and I can remember back in 1954, I played for the Detroit Tigers, and guess what? We didn't have a black guy on the club yet. They went out that year and got a guy named Ozzie Virgil from the Dominican. He was Larry Doby had come up but we just didn't have it. And all of a sudden, boy, my brother said you just go everywhere they were playing and you watch them and you start signing these guys and then all of a sudden something happened. These guys, I don't know what, during the summertime, Milt said you go out after about maybe 5 or 10 years of him scouting. He said you go out to these baseball fields and hot off. They were not out there. You go to the gymnasium, they were all in the gym. Okay?
It's incumbent on people like me to try to get kids back into the parks, try to get them to playing baseball. White kids are playing by leaps and bounds because the venues are there for basketball and football. In the South now, football is year-round.
Right.
You know, if you're not on the field, you're training, you're in the weight program, you're in all of this. That's hurt baseball, especially in the South.
Well, I don't think it'll ever be, you know, like it was when you had 6 or 7, maybe 8 guys. The Giants always had a bunch of players, a bunch of black players on the ball club. And of course, here Ernie I was a long time, George Altman. But I don't think you will ever see that again. You gotta, I think they got an academy out in Los Angeles, down in Compton. And this is what you got to build around the country if you want more black ball players, American ball players to play in the Major League. And I guess because you don't have that now. You have, you know, Dominican places over there, Puerto Rico. Each club have academies over there, and they put players. They sign kids like 14, 15 years old. They bring them over there to play. And the kids got a good experience. to play this game. So I think they will continue doing that. You might get spotty and see guys, black guys coming in the major league, but I don't think it will ever be like it was.
It is a concern of mine. It has been a concern of mine that we don't see as many African Americans playing the game as we used to see. Right. There were a time when it was myself, William, Billy Williams. It was 5 of us on one team, and now you just don't you don't see any
teams with none.
I have no idea what's the reason.
It's interesting that if you look at the state of where Mobile was at the time when all these greats were developed, it's much like the state of the Dominican Republic today. See, things really go back to basics. How do you survive? What is it that's in your purview that you see that you can do to bring yourself out of this condition? So I think the young men who are in Dominican Republic and playing these games see that opportunity much as the young men who were in Mobile at the time attempting to escape poverty, and this was an avenue by which they could do that.
I think baseball can recapture the imagination of the African American community, but I think it has to be a conscious effort. And I don't think it has to be baseball to do it. I think we have a responsibility, we being the black community, to find our way back to another avenue of exposing our kids, especially from a health and safety perspective, especially from a longevity perspective. Major League Baseball is saying, here we are. Granted, they're not all over the place, but they are saying, here we are.
But Mobile is proudly in the minds and hearts of all the men who represented the port city proudly and loved their home, a city that's produced and nurtured baseball talent second to none.
It wasn't my World Series. It wasn't my winning the World Series. It was Mobile and Plateau and Africa Town. I just wanted to share that with the community because it was the community that gave me the platform to develop to be, a major league ball player. So when we won it, I said to my wife, I said, the parade coming up, ticker tape parade coming up. I said, but you know what? I said, I'm gonna miss that parade because I want to share this with my hometown.
I tell you what I did one night. We played the All-Star game here in Atlanta, and I started the game, and the 5th inning, they taken me out, and by the 9th inning, I was in Mobile. I had caught me a plane, and it was in Mobile to watch the rest of the game.
And I didn't pick up nothing but a bowling ball during the winter. Tommy, A.G., Cleon, we used to go to bowling at and bowl. And about 3 weeks before the season start, before spring training start, we'll start calling around. Aaron, my brother Franklin, Cleon, Tommy, Milton, Frank Bowling. We all got together to hit 2 or 3 rounds. We didn't have a pitching cage. You had to either hit the ball to left field, hit the ball to right field. You couldn't hit the ball up the middle. I think that's taught us too, go with the pitch. But that's what we did. And all of a sudden we'd get in the stands, and because Aaron had some time in the big league, and he would take the floor and talk about baseball, talk about playing Major League Baseball. And all of a sudden, at the end, they say, we'll see you down the road. And that's what we did during the winter. And everybody tried to uphold Mobile to do good.